This is my inclusive assessment by Casey Ashlock. My first one is the purpose of an assessment. An assessment is a process of what teachers use to gather information over what students know based off of their TEKS. It's analyzing data and gathering information from the assessments to adjust their teaching methods to support students, adding tools, materials, different manipulatives that can to help them, but you must gather information from those to provide those tools so you can see students' progress, outcome, and needs. I have historical versus contemporary models, which is just two ways of assessing students by gathering information. Historical model was finding students' difficulties, identifying them, and referring to what multidisciplinary team evaluating what those problems were to see what was eligible for the students in the individualized education program. Students were referred to special education services. The contemporary model problem-solving model, students are focusing on finding the solution where you're finding not just searching for the eligibility, but also or altering placements, finding documents, utilizing and referring to the evaluation of special education instead of disability for forcing students who may or not be special education services. The legal foundation is the IDEA and the NCLB are laws that were assessment tools to support students on establishing what their accountability was, emphasizing on assessing students and attaining the strategies you needed to evaluation, test accommodations that might improve the student's ability to reach the standards of the assessment given. You're requiring the statewide or alternating exams to measure the progress within the general education. You're setting standards of an accountability for those students. Helps teachers better evaluate the student performance. Culturally responsive assessment was disproportionately in the rate of occurrence with some students on their backgrounds of ethnical and cultural or those home lives really did put them in that category lies with the clinical judgment. Students were put on a bias and discriminations, but on the background of increasing that risk becoming disabled, but it was very important that increasing risk doesn't lead to those bias adjustments on where they were putting into that category of it. The multi-tiered system, also known as MTSS and air analysis, was a framework designed of three tiers to monitor students' academic progress, interventions with students who, when compared to their peers, are a risk to exhibit certain problems, and when there is no success with those first two tiers, students were receiving interventions from the teachers to assist team on specific design difficulties on where they were having issues. It was an important role in MTSS on how students complete those tasks, but the ecological assessment was a natural environment. To influence on the learning progress, you were having interventions with the students on what difficulties they were having in the classroom and what tools and strategies on how to diagnose would evaluate that and how to better have that system. Another assessment planning and ethical practices, you have the legalities, which was determining the comprehension assessment of students what was constructed. You had to show documentations for it, assessing what specific concerns there were, who and what the purpose of the assessment was being administered, multiple assessments just to see if students were eligible for what accommodations they could be receiving in the classroom or just other exams or tests or anything that was being administered onto them, and then what was acceptable from those students when testing them. There was also the individualized assessment plans, which was just reviewing the screening information, also seeing what further evaluations were needed when analyzing certain data and what data you were collecting on those procedures. It was a team that was collecting these assessments and seeing who could see what and what was being told from it. It was an individualized family service plan, also told from what parents if they were under the age of 3. Students and parents are able onto a team and everyone needs to be a part of it. It is required by law. Some of my key takeaways when it comes to going over my assessment on this PowerPoint was when students are being assessed, it's an ongoing process that allows teachers to monitor and support students' needs. One of the quotes I found was improving education and achievement for all students, especially for a student who are culturally, linguistically, and ethically diverse. It's just those students who have that specific background. That's where they were put into those categories on what specifically was happening, how were they be putting into that role before it was getting there, and so how can teachers monitor and support those students. Another one was historical and contemporary models of assessments. It's identifying the problems of it and determining how to it and what models and what collecting data can help prevent and support those students. And assessments are both informal and formal methods to observe and test monitoring students' growth. You need to collect this data on what general education and how to support those students so you can prevent additional assessments, because if you just continue on having multiple assessments, you're not getting anywhere. There's no progress, there's no growth in helping these students out. So that's why it's important to take these assessments and what steps you can take to support those students. There was only one reference I have. It was from the Pearson book chapter that was provided for us, and here's my documentation and my reference for it of citing. Thank you.